Hi, and welcome to the SBOM Update with SBOM Europe. Today is April 9th, 2025, and we're going to give you an update on the CRA and a few related items we've been working with. The CRA has now been in place for a couple of months. We're now down to 975 days, and this is calendar days, not work days, to get ready. And for the vulnerability incident reporting, there's even shorter time. So how about you, Anthony? Are you ready?
I'm raising awareness at the moment. I think there's a lot of people who aren't aware of what's coming, or feel they've got a lot of time before it really hits them.
Yes, definitely. Over here in Sweden, where I'm based, I keep complaining that while the larger companies that have compliance department and are used to this kind of regulation, they are slowly starting up after the needs to work and all of that. But smaller companies are not remotely aware of what's going to happen. So we need to continue speaking about the Cyber Resilience Act. And we are SBOM Europe. I'm Olle Johansson. And who are you, Anthony?
I'm Anthony Johansson from the UK, promoting the world of SBOMs and developing tooling, evangelizing why your software supply chain needs to be, you need to be in control of it and to protect from the vulnerabilities that may impact you, your customers, your businesses.
Yes, and I'm in, as I said, in Sollentuna, Sweden. I'm a consultant working with security, embedded system, a lot of open source history as well, and also managing a project called DNS Tapir for DNS security and analysis. That's cool, but way bit out of scope for today. But let's start then. The agenda for today's session, which will be a brief update. We hope that's going to be brief at least, is a bit of summary what has happened since the CRA was actually officially becoming a law in December. 4 months with CRA. Have we seen any changes? What's new? A bit of other SBOM and regulation related news. Introduction to our new training class and information about coming events where we'll participate. But let's start here. Since the CRA, there has been a standardization request from the EU Commission. And the Commission builds now legislation that is kind of generic. And in order to know whether or not you comply, they ask official EU standardization bodies to come with proposals for horizontal standards that the EU will accept, hopefully, as a basis for checking your conformity with the law. So in the CRA, there are a lot of technical requirements in Annex 1, both on the product per se, also about the vulnerability handling. And each one of those have gotten a standardization request. So in one single document, there's 41 standards that they want organizations to deliver and develop. And the organizations in this case are Sense and Elec for the horizontal standards. That means standards that apply to all products. Secure by design, automatic updates, protection of denial of service attacks, and a lot of other requirements. In addition, there are standards that apply to a single group of products. Those are the products specifically in the important and critical classes that require a bit more work than self-assessment. And that standard request has gone to ETSI and Sense and Elec. So both of these have working groups that work with standardization. And as we understand, this won't be done overnight. There are time limits, but if you wait for these standards, you will get them late 2026 or something, and then you have probably just a year to work. So I don't think you can wait. There will be a few previews, and you have to stay up to date with these organizations. But you really have to start now and try to understand the ideas behind the CRA, in my view. What do you think, Anthony?
Well, it's a bit of a concern if the standards don't get approved until very late in the day. So I hope that the standards are based on current practice. So they're not going to invent anything that's going to be strange or surprising to industry. I hope we get early sight so we can start guiding people, because really people want to get started. They want to know what they should be doing. So secure by design, yes, there's good examples of what secure by design is, but will the EU follow what maybe the US or the UK are following? Do you know, have we got any influence? Have we got any insights in terms of what the working groups are doing?
We got a bit of a hint. ENISA tried to map these requirements, but from the first Commission proposal of the CRA, with existing standards pointing out where there was gaps. So I think that's one roadmap where we can judge whether or not there is an existing standard, or if Sense and Elect has to develop something completely new. We do have a little bit of insights, but the problem with this standardization, as compared with open organizations like the IETF or ECMA, is that a lot of things are in-house. They're done with, I'm not sure, but I have a feeling that they're done with NDAs. There will be public previews. And when they're published, they're going to cost money to access. And there's a huge discussion in other parts of the EU about making legislations where I have to pay money to understand the law, how to follow the law. And I think the latest, this may be rumors, but the latest action here was that ISO and Sense and Elect sued the European Court of Justice. So we'll see what happens, but we surely try to follow this as much as possible. But I think engaged as an expert will take a lot of hours from every week.
Yeah.
So you have to get funding.
I think that mapping might be very useful to just at least, it's going to be a good, 80% of the way there, hopefully. So at least if you can start thinking about your products.
Yeah, we have prepared a bit of mapping for our training class. Maybe we can share parts of that as an SBOM Academy on YouTube later on.
Yes.
To show the thinking behind this.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move on. This is happening, and many of these organizations formed working groups before they got the official request for standards, because they knew it was coming. And Sense and Elect has been working a lot with the Red Delegated Act, and the cybersecurity part of that matches CRA. So I think they're going to reuse part of that. So if you look into standards from Sense and Elect for Red Delegated Act, I think you're going to get pretty good insights on where this is going.
Mm-hmm.
On the open source side, a lot of the foundations and open source projects found each other while we discovered the CRA. We understood that commercial manufacturers had a lot of lobbyists in Brussels, and we almost had no one working for us. And as a result of the cooperation in ad hoc groups, Eclipse took the initiative to form a formal working group called the Open Regulatory Working Group, which consists of members from the industry. There are commercial manufacturers in this group that use open source heavily, but also a lot of the foundations we know. And this working group has started a quite ambitious project to produce a frequently asked questions document about the CRA. And I've been participating quite a lot because reading questions and reading discussions that leads up to a pull request to modify the actual document. You learn as much from reading the issues as you learn from reading the document and the discussion that goes back and forth with people who have really worked hard to try to parse and understand the legal text. And we find loopholes, we find things where we really would like clarification from the Commission if possible. So it's very, very valuable work, and I encourage everyone to go there. And if you're not only reading, that's helpful for you, but if you find questions that you want an answer to, open an issue and we'll try to help you. But there's a large group of people involved in this from many different areas.
So if you find sort of an ambiguity in the Act, do you think this group has some influence to be able to clarify any issues or ambiguities?
I think there are a lot of people who are experienced either in open source or open source for business, OSBOs, that can help you. But there are contacts with people, and I think the working group is trying to establish a way of communicating with the Commission. But we have to remember that the law is published, the law is there. And from a formal point of view, it's now up to the courts and judges to decide how to interpret the law. But the Commission can give non-binding hints, I think.
Okay.
And that's the best we can wish for. But our questions may also lead to input for future clarifications, improvements, either in implementation guides or in the actual law itself when it's going to be updated. But that's a long term. But I think the implementation guides are closer.
I know you've been
So we'll
involved.
see.
What sort of issues are you see? What are the sort of the main issues that are causing a lot of debate? I was going to say debate, whether that's the right word, but concern, debate.
Since the focus a lot here is open source, both how can manufacturers consume open source, how can manufacturers work with open source, as well as open source projects and developers. They're also worried because in the first version of CRA, they were really affected. They would become liable for their work in really bad ways. So we're trying to sort out a lot of those issues. But there are a lot of questions about manufacturer. When do I become a manufacturer? And that's a really gray area that I'm discussing in many meetings now on finding ways to try to give some examples, because people, they really want to get a living out and possibly make a profit out of working with open source, and that should be okay. But at some point, they're becoming a manufacturer and they're as liable for their open source code as if they sold it under a commercial license. And we have to figure out ways to help people judge where they are and how to handle that, I think. But that's my personal view. In the CRA, there's also a list of products and classes that are treated as important, class 1 or 2, and critical. And it's always hard to have that kind of list in a law that should be long-term. And now they came out with a bit of clarification text for public review, and both OpenSSF and ORCWG are working heavily these days. It has to be in a few days. I don't remember exactly. I think maybe it's April 15th. But both groups are working heavily to see whether the definition of operating system fits in, where does a compiler fits in, or Docker containers, or there's always ambiguities. And in a few years, we'll have totally new products that we didn't think exist today. And how do we parse that, and where do we place them in the classes?
Yeah.
That's going to be interesting. But there is a process for updating this list defined in the CRA. So as a manufacturer, you have to follow the official journal of the European Union, which is hard, but that we have to monitor the publications here and see what's happening. This working group also works a lot with awareness. There's a couple of people within Eclipse Foundation that travels around and have booths at trade shows, talk at conferences, and so on. So they're doing a good job informing people about how the CRA affects them and how CRA affects their work with open source. So I really encourage people to look this project up, attend meetings, seminars that they run, and please go look at the FAQ work on GitHub.
I was going to say, and I'm trying to grow awareness in the UK to help manufacturers or who are going to export into the EU to make them aware, because obviously there's a different viewpoint from being inside the EU to being outside the EU. There's a few additional features that you have to do. So that's very much work in progress for me at the moment. We did a presentation yesterday that's now available for people in the UK to access.
Yep. So what about SBOMs in the CRA? There are texts about SBOMs in multiple places. There's no requirement for vendors to hand out SBOMs to their customers. There's a text saying, if you do that, then please use one of the formats we are going to recommend in the future. But there is a requirement for manufacturers to have an SBOM. And it mentions at least the top level components. But is that really enough, or is that just a mistake in the law text? What do you think?
I think we just need to explain what we mean by top level and component. So a top level component is a component your application, your product uses directly. So maybe you are using a function within a framework or a library. And clearly that's important, but many components bring in other components to deliver their functionality. So these are what we'll call transitive components. And these are also part of your product, your application. So I think just focusing on the top level is a good start, but given the fact you have a requirement to ensure that your product is not vulnerable or exploitable to any vulnerabilities, you need to have that full picture to go all the way down, because that's part of your, that's the baggage of your product. So, if you deliver an operating system with all the components, a compiler, even if you're not using the compiler, you need to know it's on your system, because potentially it could be used by a hacker. So I think it's important that the SBOM is complete, and for you to protect your customers.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, this is mentioned in the text on stuff you need to have when communicating with market authorities, and the market authorities can find the dependencies of your top-level dependencies themselves. But at least they should be. But since a manufacturer is responsible, as you said, for the full delivery, all the components, as a manufacturer, I would really, exactly as you said, I would love to have the full one. Maybe I'm not giving that out to market authorities. But I think this is a confusing part that people parse in different ways. We'll see when we see the horizontal standards and the implementation guides what this really means.
Yeah, and the danger of just leaving the top level is that if you then try and derive the lower level transitive dependencies, you may, depending on when you do it, you may get different versions of a component. Really, you need to know your SBOM is your baseline. So having all the versions, that you've definitely used when you've released your product, I think is essential to support your vulnerability management process. And make sure it's not open to interpretation, because if somebody says you're using a particular version of a component and you're using a later version, well, the SBOM is a great way to document that.
Yeah. And definitely if your deliverables are Docker containers or cubes for Kubernetes, then you really need to check the full container, not just your additions, but all of it.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll probably come back to this. Few other updates. My project within OWASP Cyclone DX, the Transparency Exchange API, is making progress. We are in a few weeks going to have, hopefully, if people join and roll up the sleeves and work, we're going to have a beta 1. In May at OWASP AppSec in Barcelona, we're going to have the first Cyclone DX hackathon, which is free participation. It's supported by ECMA International. And we're going to test the first implementations of clients and servers in Barcelona. So please book that in your calendars. There's going to be information on LinkedIn and on the OWASP AppSec website shortly. I also want, since we talked a lot about ORCWG, we need to come back to this in another update, but the OpenSSF have a separate working group called the Global Cyber Policy Working Group that also focus a lot on the CRA and do a lot of interesting things. We just got a symbol. This is not approved or so, but I stole it because I think it's rather fun. The CRA fish, crawfish, a happy guy with a European Union t-shirt. But check that working group out. They have also, like our CVG, webinars and a lot of activities. This week, they're very, very busy at VulnCon in Raleigh, USA, where they have a special day on the Cyber Resilience Act and a lot of activities in the conference program. We're going on tour, aren't we, Anthony?
Oh yes. Well, we like our conferences, but it's great to share networking with our fellow colleagues. So we're in various countries there in the next couple of months.
Absolutely. I think this is important, one, to build a network and share experience, but also raise awareness of SBOM technology, of the legislation and how it technically affects development teams. So I'm going to Gothenburg next week for the Free and Open Source Software Conference. That's an annual conference that has been going on for many years, to talk about the Cyber Resilience Act. Then you're heading to Germany.
So I'm heading to Germany, showing how various Python tools that I've authored can be used to support your CRA journey, and start giving you those insights, creating SBOMs, but actually analyzing the SBOMs so you can manage your development and make your development more secure.
And boy, do you have a lot of tools for SBOMs.
Plenty in the pipeline.
Yep. And at the same time, actually, I'm in Holland, Netherlands, in Veenendaal. I don't know how to pronounce that. For a free seminar with info support that you can join virtually. You'll find it on LinkedIn if you check me up. The day after, we're going to have the first SBOM Europe trainings internally for info support consultants. And we could have those for you as well if you just contact us. But in May in lovely Barcelona, aren't we going to have fun?
Yeah, you're going to see a double act. Yes, I think we've still got to work out exactly how we're going to do it. But I think Ole, you'll do the theory, and I'll try and do the practical side of things.
Or I'll do the talking and you'll do the dancing.
Well, maybe not, but yeah. But it's an opportunity to share. It's a really important community. This we know there's some really important people in the OWASP community.
Yes.
The Cyclone DX community is really active, and we're part of that. So it's good.
And we're gonna repeat our ideas on the SBOM maturity state. Where are we with SBOMs that I started in at FOSDEM in February?
Yes.
So we're going to have to evaluate and see if we can move pointers ahead or if we're taking steps backwards. But that's going to be interesting. And we're going to talk about good SBOMs, bad SBOMs, and the evil parts, stuff you don't know and have missed. So come and listen to us in Barcelona at AppSec. I'm really looking forward. AppSec is a brilliant conference with, as you said, all the right people. So I'm going to learn a lot of new things and come back with millions of ideas. That's going to be fun. Then hopefully we're heading to France in June, and you're going to speak at OWCon.
OWCon. So that's an open source community, a French community, does great work promoting open source. And I'm going to describe one of my projects that I got some funding from NLNet, which is generating, among other things, it generates SBOMs from binary applications. So it's work in progress, but it's starting to deliver some interesting insights, and hopefully sharing it with the community, it'll make it better. But given the fact that, some organizations might not have the source code for their applications that they are going to be supporting in their product, this might hopefully be a very useful, give you some useful insights.
Great. Now time for some commercials. We are launching our first one-day trainings to get you ready for the EU Cyber Resilience Act. You can find all the information on our website, but this is a unique opportunity to spend a day with me and Anthony and colleagues that work with the same kind of issues to learn the basics of the CRA, how it affects your lifecycle management, your product security, how you assess the risk level, and there's a lot of things we compressed into one single day. And we're going to run it in Manchester, UK on May 12th and in Stockholm, Sweden on June 20th. Do you want to add anything here?
No, I think what we want to try and do is to give you the tools and the framework for you to be able to do this within your business. So it's not just the theory. Hopefully, we're going to give you some practical tips in terms of how you can find the evidence to support what the CRA is going to look for when you get to the position of getting your products assessed. Yes, this will be, and I think sharing within fellow manufacturers, I think will be good. Just so you can share, you can see the common concerns. And I think as a community, the community will become stronger.
Absolutely. It's important that vertical sectors and businesses meet and discuss this from various angles, because it's a big change in how you work with software development for many organizations, and especially a change in the business models. But we'll cover that more in the training. You'll find all the information you need about this and registration forms on SBOMEurope.eu, where you also find the pricing terms and information that if you're multiple persons from the same company, we can agree on a discount for you. So get in touch and we'll discuss how to make this work.
And of course, if you want to do that just within your organization, then that's, get in touch with us and we can make arrangements as well. Because maybe if you just do it within your own organization, you can be a little bit more open and you can share things than you might do in a more public training session.
And on our website, you'll find information about our shorter webinars or seminars on site with one-on-ones on vulnerability management, SBOMs, CRA, and many other topics. So we can tailor-make in-house training for you and your teams. I think that's all we had for today. Follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on YouTube or Blue Sky. We're on many channels. And we'll see you soon, hopefully when we're on tour in April and May. Thank you for today. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, Olle. Bye.
Bye.